来跟我们讲解这个自我发现它的领导力的探索过程。然后呢，因为我们 PCE 呢是长期以来就是说立志于就是育儿育己，那么赵博士也会结合他在育儿过程中一些感悟哈，来跟大家一起分享。所以今天呢，大家可以说是双丰收，不仅呢从职场这个板块能得到得到一些领悟，然后呢在育儿方面也会可以得到那个赵博士的一些教诲吧。那就是说赵博士是非常有成就的一个职场高管，然后呢现在是退休了哈，然后也非常热衷于公益，在全国有很多场讲座，就是有关领导力的。那这一次呢，我和赵博士呢是第2次合作，前一次呢是在北美的职场群，然后受到了大家非常的好评。那我个人呢也非常受益，那所以我们这一次呢再度合作，这是 PCE 这个大平台哈，能够给赵博士一个跟
抱歉 ，Melody 看不到，听不见你的声音。
现在能听到吗？
好，现在好了。
那我刚才讲到哪了？
是刚刚最后一点。
最后一点，好吧。那好，现在把话筒交给赵博士，谢谢。
好，谢谢啊。你能看到我的 screen 吗？现在？
可以。
可以，好，谢谢啊。大家晚上好。非常感谢这个PCE organization 今天组织这个活动，非常荣幸有机会跟大伙交流。所以我这第一次对这个 PCE 不是很熟悉的，就是大伙感兴趣的东西，我不一定很的了解。所以 feel free to stop me if you have questions in the middle of the talk. This is a relatively informal, so if you have a question, feel free to either put it in the chat or ask me directly. First of all, thanks for the invitation by Melody and PCE, and thanks for the introduction. It's a Saturday afternoon. Appreciate you take the time to actually join this conversation here. Let me start it with a quote from Mark Twain, and of course you know who Mark Twain is. This is a long time ago, but he says something along the line of, "What is a human life?" He said something along the line, the first 1/3 of life is about good time. The rest really is about remember about it. I probably don't agree with the 1/3 comment. You can still have a good time beyond the first 1/3 of life, but the principle is right. In the first part of your life, you tend to you try to have a good time, and latter part of your life, you try to remember all the good things you experienced. With that, I'm really honored to have the opportunity to share my experience and my learning through my career with this group. Let me just start with a few photos as a quick introduction of myself. On the top left, that's my family. I was born and grown up in China, in Shanxi, Taiyuan, and spent roughly about half my life in China, half in the US. Almost exactly half, 30 years in China, 30 years in the US. I retired from ExxonMobil exactly 1 year ago, March last year, after worked in the industry for about 30 years. That's on the left. That's my wife. She stopped working quite a few years ago, mostly enjoying tennis. On the side, that's my two sons. On the right is Daniel. Daniel is currently the lead economist and the senior manager for data science at a company many of you might have heard called Glassdoor. If you watch CBS and NPR and other news, he is often on the TV about job analysis and employment. He's based in New York. On the left is my son, youngest son, David. He's working with a startup company called Paragon. He's a software engineer. On the top right is a marathon picture. I ran a marathon in, I think that was 2019 in Shanghai. I've been running marathons since 2009. Every year I run a marathon. And that's a picture I took when I was running the Shanghai Marathon when I was in China. On the bottom left is a book I printed about photography. I'm an amateur photography. I like to take photos and stuff. When I was in China, I made a couple of photo books based on all the experience I had in China about creative photography. The photo on the bottom right is more interesting. It was a photo I took. I don't know anybody on the call from Guizhou. I visited Guizhou. It's there is a group of singer called Tongzu Dage singer, and one of the singer is a pretty famous singer. I forgot her name. And we had lunch in her family, and I just saw this. 3 shirts on the wall and took a picture. On the right, of course, that's their ethnic 民族服装. On the left, it's a shirt 做最好的自己. I thought it's a wonderful photo. It's a reflection of what my philosophy is. It's really be the best of yourself. That's how you live your life. I thought it was a wonderful photo to share with you. Then after I retired in March last year, pretty much the week after I retired, I started my first retirement project was writing a book about leadership. In fact, I have been writing a weekly blog on LinkedIn about leadership, about decision making. It's a different topic, but every week I posted something there. Right now there are about 280,000 people around the world actually subscribe my weekly writing. And when I retired, a lot of people asked me, hey, why don't you write a book? So this became my retirement project. The book, after about 10 months, the book was published in January, and currently it's on Amazon, it's Barnes & Noble in quite a few different platforms. It has been very well received, very well reviewed. It's sold in 19 different countries so far, and the feedback has been very, very positive. If anybody is interested, the book link is on the bottom there. You may ask why do I write a book? I think it's serve a few different purposes. On the left, it's a quote from Toni Morrison. You might know she's the Nobel Prize laureate in literature. She says something like, writing is an advanced form and a slow form of reading. If you find a book you really want to read and it hasn't been written yet, then you must write it. In a way, I wrote the book because one of the topics, leadership is one of those topics. I read thousands of books around leadership, but always struggle with the concept of what leadership is or is not. It's not because there are a lot of wonderful books there, but each book you learn something, but it's not quite getting the clarity. So I just say, hey, maybe writing a book is a good idea. So that's part of the reason I wrote the book, is to create a clarity, to understand, really help myself to understand further what leadership is not. That's one reason. Of course, the second reason is to share the learning, share my experiences with others. Hopefully, the others can maybe expedite their leadership journey faster than I had. So that's another reason I wrote the book. So with that long-winded introduction, maybe I share a little bit. Melody asked me to share a little bit my life journey. I put this together like yesterday. I thought to share a little bit about my life. Maybe it started from the bottom right. You probably, many of you heard China experienced the first time in a long time, the population declined last year. I think we lost about 1 million people last year. You may or may not know the last time China actually experienced the population decline was 62 years ago in 1961. That's the year I was born. I used the title, I was a very lucky person because 1961 was the year, I think the infant mortality was about 133 out of 1,000. That means about 13% of people, baby born in that year, never had the chance to live in this world. That's how bad that year was. 13% of people, the baby never survived. So the fact I was able to survive, I consider myself pretty lucky, to be honest. That's the year a lot of, because of the starvation, I don't remember, but I know my uncle, both my grandfather died from that year, probably from starvation. And I grew up in a very small town on the bottom right. It's about, when I was there, there was about maybe 100 people. If you see, it's a teeny tiny house on the right. That's where I spent my childhood. There right now there are probably about 15 people left in the village. You can probably guess my education started right around the time the Cultural Revolution started, 1967, and my education finished at exactly the same time the Cultural Revolution ended. It's a perfectly overlap. I graduated from high school end of 1976. You can call it lucky or unlucky, but I was the last group of students actually went to the Shanghai Xiaoxiao Cadui 1977. So I was the last group actually had that experience. In 1977, when the college admission started, I did the exam in 1977, but was not good enough to actually attend college. That year, I think only about 270,000 people were accepted out of 5.7 million people took the exam nationwide. That's roughly about 5% went to college. So I had to take the exam again in 1978. Attended Taiyuan Ligun Daxue. That's in 1977. After college, I worked for quite a few years in different roles. Then I was very fortunate. Were able to come to the U.S. for graduate school in 1988. I'm still the only one from my college class actually went to graduate school in the U.S. I did my PhD at MIT and finished in 92. Worked in a company, some of you might know, a company called W.R. Grace based in Maryland for about 12 years in various roles, technology, then later in business. Around 1999 was the first time I actually had some business experience. We were involved with a venture activity right before the first internet bubble burst. That's around year 2000. Now, after that experience, I realized, heck, I know nothing about what to take to actually develop a business or grow a business. I decided to go back to business school. So in 2001, I went to Walton, the executive MBA program. I had a more systematic exposure to what really the business side of things in between 2001 and 2003. Unfortunately, right after around the time I was at Walton, Grace went into Chapter 11. bankruptcy. So around 2005, I joined ExxonMobil. The first few years in ExxonMobil, I was managing global licensing business, catalyst business, and licensing business. Had the opportunity to travel around the world, probably 30, 40 different countries to do business. So that's had a lot of different exposure in terms of different culture, business in different parts of the world. Then 2017, I went to China, lead the development of ExxonMobil's largest investment project in China. It's a $10 billion investment. We developed, had a lot of engagement with various level of government officials. That's a photo. Attended a meeting with between our CEO and Premier Li Keqiang. On the second, from the left, that's me attending at that meeting. After about 3 years there, completed that assignment. I came back to Houston, was involved with the technology scouting and venture, worked with a lot of startup company in the tech space for about 2.5 years. Then I retired last year. So that's kind of a rough walk back of my journey. Of course, on the surface you see a lot of success, but behind the success there were plenty of struggles and failures, up and downs throughout my career. One of the questions, I always struggled. I assume many of you probably had the same experience. Is what is leadership? What is a leader supposed to do, and what does a leader supposed to behave? How leaders make a decision? That's part of the reason I start to reflect and write in the book. So it's in a way, this is how I think about the three aspects of the topic. Really, it's all interconnected: leadership, self-discovery or self-awareness, and success. Those are all interconnected. Of course, this is just my perspective. I might be a little bit biased because of my own experience. But it's what is leadership? How do you define leadership? Why is it important to have a self-awareness or self-discovery? How do you define success? I think those are the questions many of us throughout our career ask ourselves. Of course, this is in the context of a career, but it's the same in the context of child education. How do you define success for your child? Or should you define the success for your child, or let them figure out what success is? Or should you focus on their self-awareness and their leadership? I think that's the kind of question we should be all asking ourselves along whatever journey you are on. So the first, this is the essence of my book. Really is about, that's the title of my book, The Odyssey of Self-Discovery. Why I think the self-discovery is so important. It's by the way, on the right side, it's a photo of my younger son when he was graduating at the University of Virginia. It's in front of whatever that picture is. I think a lot of us, especially when you're young, we have doubts or we have a wonder or not sure about ourselves. And especially when we're grown up in one culture, working or living in a different culture, that creates a lot of gap or a lot of uncertainty in life. The critical part is we have to accept who we are. We will never look like someone else. Will never speak English like somebody else. And we will never have the kind of perceived so-called executive presence as somebody else. But it's okay as long as we find the best version of ourselves. I think, I forgot who said this, but many people, I think there is a Chinese, somebody said that 好多人做不好自己是因为总想做别人. I think it's very well said. Think about in that lens. We are who we are. We are never going to be somebody else. So that in that context, that's why the self-awareness is so important. I put that to a short sentence there, but it's really it's a self-awareness starts with the self-acceptance. Only when you accept who you are, you can have self-awareness. When you have self-awareness, then you become much more confident. The opposite is not true. When you don't have self-awareness, when you try to project confidence, now you become arrogant. It's not confidence, it's arrogance. Many people think they are. Did you have a question, Melody? Oh, many people think they know who they are and they know themselves well, but there was an article published on Harvard Business Review. I think it's about 2 years ago. The study showed it's a very large study. The study actually showed that only about 10 to 15% of people have good self-awareness. That means that 85–90% of us do not really know ourselves that well, do not know us as well as we think we do. You have to go through a very intentional process to really know who you are and what's truly important to you. It doesn't just happen. You have to go through that mental process to reflect and to challenge yourself. It's an intentional process. Without going through that process, without you are going to be making a lot of decisions reacting to the moment rather than making decisions based on a guiding principle. Once it's clear what's truly important to you, what your value is, you would more likely be making decisions based on that guiding principle rather than emotionally making decisions based on what's happening in that moment. That's why the self-awareness is so important in this process. This is not just about leadership, but this is I think it's true in a lot of things. So what is self-awareness, you ask? I kind of think about the self-awareness in 4 different buckets. The first, by the way, this is all in my book if you're interested. The first bucket is truly know your value. Know what's truly important to you. This sounds easy, but it's not. This is especially important when we grown up in a different culture and living in another culture. Very often the value system are different. You have to figure out what's truly important to you. In a work setting, very often we tend to look at promotions and money. All those things sounds important, but those satisfaction really only last about maybe a week or 2. Very, very quickly those things go away. And so you have to really fundamentally figure out what is truly important. This is obviously there is no one answer. Hey, what's important to me is not necessarily true for you. What's important for you is different from somebody else. You have to figure out yourself. One thing, 2 things, maybe one thing. One thing I'll really emphasize is whether or not you realize or not, it's how we are being raised, how we grown up has a much deeper impact than many of us realize. If you reflect a lot of things, why it's important, you can trace back a lot of things back to early day, how you are being raised, how you grown up. That has a huge impact on the value system we have. Flip side is, if that's correct, then that's what you should be thinking when you raise your child, is how they grown up will actually develop their value system and what's truly important for them. That's the lens you should think about when you raise your child. The second aspect you probably heard plenty in work setting is know your strengths and weakness. That again, it's sounds trivial, but it's not. It's both sides. Know your strengths. It's actually more difficult than you think. A lot of things when you can do it well, you think it's easy.
可以打断一下吗？ 赵博，您的 slide 还在 The Other Self Self-Discovery 那个 Self-Awareness 那一章。
是
Okay.
I'm still here.
好
Yeah.
好 ，OK。
There's strengths. Know your strengths. It's the strengths. It's something. It's pretty easy to you. You think that not necessarily your strengths, but if you look at it in a different lens, that might be your strength. So you have to figure out know really clearly what's your strengths. Weakness is even more difficult because people generally don't tell you. You have to figure out what truly is your weakness. It's one thing I'll emphasize here is very often this is probably a time of the year a lot of companies going through self-evaluation, or performance evaluation. One of the things I always trying to emphasize going through that process is don't so much focus on your weakness. Focus on your strengths. Focus on how to level your strengths to bring it to the next level. So that's probably more productive than trying to focus on what your weakness is. It's because a lot of those things are not easy to change who you are. Another aspect of the third aspect of self-awareness is how you are being perceived by others. This is the one. You may think, hey, I'm who I am. What other people think, it doesn't matter. The reality is, doesn't matter it's right or wrong. How you are being perceived by others can have a big impact on how effective you are in the workplace. Even if the perception is 100% wrong, it still impacts how you work in the organization. So you have to figure out how you are being perceived by others in the organization. I shared an example in my book. I interviewed a senior VP in an insurance company called AXL Innovation, and she told me an exercise she did. One time she said, I asked about 20 people around me to describe me in one word. And she was shocked that 9 out of the 20 people came back with the same word, intense. She realized how she was being perceived by others is her intensity. Intense could mean many different things. It could be a good, could be bad, could be terrible. She said that after that experience, after that learning, she said, with that self-awareness, I focus on how to leverage that intensity to my advantage. I know that's how I'm being perceived. That's not necessarily a weakness. It's just I have more awareness. That's how people look at me. I'm going to leverage that intensity to my advantage. I think that's a good example of how do you figure out that you are being perceived by others in workplaces. This is very difficult. The other option is, of course, to find a mentor, find people you can trust in workplace. The last component of the self-awareness is understand the context of your work. Very often, a lot of us on the call probably have a technical background working in the technical community. Doesn't matter if you are doing technical work, you have to understand if the technical work, if it succeeds, what does that mean for the business? If it fails, what does that mean for the business? Or what decision the organization or the business will be making based on your decision, based on your technical work. The more you can understand that context, the bigger picture, the more likely you can communicate your work more intelligently, more aligned with what the business is. That's a part that I think a lot of early career people probably could benefit a lot, is take the time, take the effort to proactively understand the context of your work. So that's I talk quite a bit about the self-awareness, but I think it's a very important topic to have that mindset. How do you develop a good self-awareness in the workplace? I think that's true for your child education as well. How do you make sure your child have a good self-awareness, what's their strengths, what's their weakness, how they are being perceived by others, so they can have more effective interaction with others. I think the same principle probably applies. So the next topic, that three item is the next one is what is success? This is one in a general term. Success, most people think about in two aspects. One is the inner perspective of fulfillment, the satisfaction of happiness. And the second component is the external recognition by society, by peers, by organizations. It's very often we focus on the second item, but in fact, the longer you live, the realize that probably the first item is probably more important to you. But how you define success, everybody will be a little bit different. You have to figure out yourself what is truly important to you. Many people on the call, I'm sure, are talented, career-driven people. Many are either leader or aspiring to be a leader. It's in my book. I did a survey. I'll ask you later, actually, in the next slides, do the survey. But I shared a story in my book to look at some. I suspect that there are probably some artists in the audience. I shared a comparison between Picasso and Van Gogh in my book. Both are obviously the most influential artists in the Western art history. And but if you look at their success, their career are very, very different. Picasso had a success all through his life. He tried many different things: art, sculpture, ceramics, design, painting, costume. Whatever he did was wonderfully successful. So that's his life. Van Gogh, on the other hand, he was a failure after failure. He sold one painting through his entire life and never had any success throughout his life. It's if you look at how successful they are after the fact, both are obviously very successful, but they gone through a very different very different journey to achieve that success. There is no one model for success. In the end of the day, the success, I think it's, I look at it, the success is really find who you are and what's important to you and maximize your potential. That's what success is. It's not about, hey, getting to that position or this position. It's really whatever your potential, if you can maximize your potential, that's a success. So in that context, you have to develop the self-awareness and know yourself well. Hey, what do I want so that I can maximize my potential? It's not really based on what other people's projection of who you are. It's truly a self-discovery process. So it's maybe since this is a group about education, I attended a talk by the former Vice Associate Dean of Wharton Business School earlier this week. He made a comment that somebody was asking him about his philosophy of child education. How did you visit your child? He said, I don't define success for my child. It's up to them to define what their goal is, what their success is. My job is to support them to achieve the goal defined by themselves. I think that's a good way to think about the success and in the context of education and success. I think he said it summarized it pretty well in terms of how do you think about success. We need to define what our success is, and the kids needs to define what their success is. We cannot project what we want in life to the child. This is a slide more along the same line, but more about rather than look at a success, more look at about failure, the opposite side. In that context, I share a little bit about taking chance and making mistakes. Obviously, you all know this. In the Chinese culture, we tend to think about 三人行必有我师也. We tend to focus on the learning. that's a very common mindset for us, is to look at how do I learn, how do I gain more knowledge. In the Western culture, it's on the same line, but they don't focus on the learning in the same way as we do. They focus on learning through making mistakes. That's a quote by Sally Korachek. If you're not making some notable mistakes along the way, you're certainly not taking enough business and career chance. I think that's a good reflection of the different mindset between the Western culture and the Eastern culture in terms of how do we learn. It's very often we tend to think, think a lot, and by the time you think you got a good solution, other people already tried 3 times, and through exercises, through failures, to figure out what needs to be done. So guess what? The rest of the organization see what they were doing, and you were sitting there still thinking. On the right side, obviously that's a pictograph, but I think it's pretty accurate. Through theory, through learning, you can only learn so much. It's only through practice you can learn a lot. On the other hand, if you're making mistakes, that's where you truly can learn what works and what doesn't work. So you can only make mistakes if you try things. So error on the side of action is the best way to learn. That's probably an aspect a lot of us from Asian culture probably could do more in terms of focus on action, focus on don't worry too much about taking chances and making mistakes. There was a study done by the Society of Asian Scientists and Engineers, done, I think it was about 2 years ago. It's an executive group helped did the study, and they came basically about the challenge Asian professionals face in the Western business culture. And one of the 4 came out is the aversion to risk taking in both business and career. That's one of the biggest challenge for the Asian community. I strongly resonate with that mindset. Let's see. So maybe if you could start the poll, Mary, I don't know if can we put the poll on the.
Sure. Sandra or Angela, can you run the poll, please? Sandra,
so actually there is a technical issue because someone else logged in as host again. So the poll.
Forget it. That it's not important. That let's not waste
you continue. I'll send out the poll just in a few minutes. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
So this is when I was writing the book, because I have a pretty big follower, about 280,000 people subscribe to my weekly writing. So I have a pretty big audience. When I was writing the book, I set up a website, did a poll about basically a leadership survey. The question I asked people was, have you ever asked yourself, why do you want to be a leader? Followed by another question, have anybody in your organization ever asked you, why do you want to be a leader? This is the answer. On the left side, 82% of people said, yes, I've asked myself. And only 39% of people said anybody in the organization ever asked them. So it's about 43% of a gap. By the way, I did the same poll in another group. I gave a talk maybe a month or 2 ago, did a poll. The result came out exactly the same, about 80-40. That's pretty consistent. What the stat tells you is you know you want to be a leader, but organizations generally do not understand what motivated you or why do you want to be a leader. Organization mostly focus on what the organization objective is, what it takes for the organization to be successful. They don't really spend the time and effort to figure out what motivates people to be leader. That's a very individual thing. That's why a lot of the corporate leadership development program really is not effective. Usually it's left side in, right side out. It doesn't really connect with the organization objective versus the personal leadership value or what motivates the people. End up a lot of the leadership training focuses on skill sets rather than what motivates people to be leader. What's the connected the personal value with the organization, especially with the younger generation. I think that's a pretty big gap in terms of the leadership development program in a lot of organizations. So this is another aspect of the survey I did. I asked people to describe leadership in 3 words. It's an open-ended question. I asked people, share 3 words you think are actually best to define leadership. So obviously it's open-ended. It came back with a lot of different words. So the bigger words that I did make that cloud is what the show up as the top of 15 is the bigger words. Typically, I think about leadership in 3 buckets. Your value, that including your honesty, integrity, that's your personal value. That actually doesn't change much. It's how you as a person. The second bucket is behavior. Whether or not oh, by the way, the poll is on. If you could take the poll, I would appreciate it while you listen. The second bucket is behavior. It's about, you're passionate about something, or you have the courage of conviction to do something. It's a behavior. Behavior you can learn. The third bucket is skill sets. Skill sets like communication skill, people management skill. That's where, if you look at the clouds, about 13 out of the 15 people, the word came back actually. When people think about leadership, people think about the value, think about the behavior. But if you think about the leadership training in a lot of organizations, it's a focus on the skill sets. That's a big disconnect in my mind. Because why is that? Because the company really does not spend the time, go back to the earlier survey, to understand what motivates people and what inspires people to be a leader. End up, what you can only focus, you can't focus on the value and the behavior, you can only focus on the skill sets. That's why a lot of the corporate leadership development program is not that effective in my mind. Let me see. So what is leadership? Oh, by the way, this is my definition of, obviously there is no right or wrong definition of leadership, but this is my definition of leadership. Leadership is the ability to inspire, influence others to turn a vision into action. So there are a few key words here. One is leadership really is about others. It's not about you. If you want to be a leader, really it's about the people you are leading. It's not about you. The second key word is vision. If you want to lead, you have to have a vision. It doesn't matter you are a top leader, you're leading a small group, but you have to have a vision of what you want to do for the organization. There's a lot of noise in the background. The third keyword is
Nancy, can you please mute yourself?
The third keyword is action. I already said earlier, action. It's in the end we need to take action. In a way, I focus on the action, not the result. Some people think leadership is a focus on result. I don't think it that way, but organizations tend to. The reason I don't see vision into result is action is 100% within your control. Result is not necessarily within your control. You can do 100% right, everything right. Result is very often dictated by both your action and external factors which are outside of your control. So that's why I tend to focus on the action part. So that's my definition of leadership. By the way, that's a photo of the MIT entrance, a photo of the MIT entrance hall I took when I was visiting. The other word in the definition is influence. Between leadership and influence, there is a slightly different connotation about what the difference between influence and connotation. In fact, in a lot of the organization today, influence is a much more critical part of the leadership because not everybody is going to be in a leadership role or management role. everybody can be a leader if you are willing to find how you influence decision. That's why influence, when you think about leadership, think about influence, not necessarily think about, hey, you want to be in a certain position. On the right side, that's the model, actually, the theory Aristotle developed 2,000 years ago. I think it's still as applicable today as ever. I think it's perfectly articulated about what it takes to actually influence. By the way, this is my older son, Daniel. He was in the debate club, both in high school and in college when he was at Harvard debate club. This is the model he shared with me about the debate club. It's widely used about how you influence people, how do you persuade people. It's a three-legged stool. It's about logic, credibility, and emotion. The Greek word is logos, ethos, and pathos. A lot of us are technical people. The mistake most technical people make is because we're technically oriented people, we tend to focus on the facts. We tend to focus on statistics, research. We think as long as we are right, people should be listening to us. That's not true at all in the real world. Just because you are right, doesn't mean people is going to listen to you. Very often it's either because you don't have the credibility in the organization, or you don't have the trust of the other party. You can be 100% right, but if people don't trust you, then it's a moot point. You're not going anywhere. So how do you develop the credibility in the organization? It become the issue. It's not about your technical skill. It's how do I develop a credibility organization so that I can influence the decision. How do you develop a credibility? It's really two-part. One is your expertise, one is the trust. I'm sure most of you have plenty of expertise, but do you have the trust level? How do you develop a trust? In some culture, you trust people until people lose your trust. Other culture, people don't trust you until you prove trustworthy. So depends on what culture you're working. You have to figure out how to establish the trust level with the others before you can actually influence others. That has to be an intentional process. It doesn't just happen. The third component is you call emotion and passion. It's in a simple way, it's how well your message connected with the other party you're trying to persuade or influence. To be able to influence the other party, you have to understand what's in the other person's mind. If you understand what's important for them or what's in their mind, you have a much better chance to influence their decision. Like I said earlier, if you only focus on technical work, you don't understand the context of the work and the bigger picture, you're less likely you're going to be able to influence the business decision, the organization decision. But if you better understand what's the context of the work, you have a much better chance to actually influence others thinking along how your technical work actually fits in the decision-making process. This is the framework. Again, it has not changed in 2,000 years. So I think it's a very valid framework to think about when you try to influence others. In the book, I shared a conversation I had with the former governor of Puerto Rico. Turns out he also graduated from MIT. I interviewed him for the book. He shared with me exactly the same mindset. He said, when I became the governor, I was focused on the facts and didn't spend enough time to appeal to the public, and so that emotionally people can connect with some of the idea I had, so that I could be more successful. I think this is something for the technical focused people. The mistake we tend to make very often is we focus on the logical, we focus on the facts rather than focus on this. This is a three-legged stool. You have to have all the components to be able to effectively influence the organization or influence others. By the way, I made plenty of a mistake myself in this space. This is another framework in terms of the leadership or influences. I shared a little bit about how to influence. Then you ask, where do I influence? By the way, that's a picture of the Shanghai Pearl Tower. If you see, I took that photo when I was in Shanghai. So I came up with this idea called two-circle theory of leadership. I included it in my book. The way I think about the thing is where do you influence is the small circle is your job. If any of you have a job, you probably have a job description. You know exactly what your job is. Your manager know what your job is. That's inside that small circle. Outside of the big circle is where you know it's not your job. Your manager know it's not your job. Everybody know it's not your job. Very often in an organization, there is a big gap between the two circles. If nobody has told you that's not your job, and nobody has told you that is your job, it's a gray area. The higher up you go in the organization, the bigger that gap become, and how you behave in that between space really define what your leadership is and where you apply your influence. This is a in my mind, very powerful way of thinking. I can influence, but it's where do I influence? Really, it's just doing a perfect job within the small circle in an organization is necessary but not sufficient to be a leader. You have to figure out how to influence the organization outside of your defined job to develop influence, develop credibility in the organization. That's where to use this framework to think about where to influence. On the flip side, how organizations think about people is exactly the same model also apply. Most companies evaluate people in two dimensions. One dimension is your performance, one dimension is your potential. And guess what? Inside the small circles is your performance, outside the small circles is your potential. If you only focus on the inside circle, that's not sufficient to look at, hey, do you have leadership potential or not? Do you have influence in the organization or not? Very often people see your influence ability to influence or your leadership potential outside of your defined job. So that's the flip side of this model. If you think about the child education, college admission, it's exactly the same framework apply. If you think about the small circle, that's your grades, your SAT, your ACT, whatever. If you look at the top school admission, just to have a good grade, usually it's not sufficient. You have to look at what area of leadership, extracurricular activity. That's your leadership potential. That's the same model applied there as well. I think it's a pretty simple framework to think about. Hey, where do you apply your influence? Where do I actually demonstrate my leadership? So that's the model I describe in my book. The other aspect is because we again, because the culture difference, we've grown up in one culture, live in another culture. This issue of culture agility, I think it's a pretty important aspect of our success in any context, not just us, but also for our next generation. That's my simple advice: is be curious but not judgmental. And share our similarity, but respect the difference. I'll share an experience I had maybe around 2019, and at the time I was in China developing this investment project. I hosted a mayor from China, the mayor of Huizhou. Some of you might know Huizhou is a city in Guangdong with about probably 3 million people. It's not a huge city, but 3 million in the context of the US, actually, that's a pretty big population. 3 million people, a mayor in China, it's a very big job. The mayor involved with the big decision like our investment decision, that's a pretty big part of his job, but education, safety, environment, you name it, anything going on in the city, he is responsible. So it's a very, very big job. When he was visiting Texas, I arranged a meeting for him to meet with several mayors in Texas, including the mayor of Baytown. So some of you probably don't know, but Baytown is the city outside of Houston, where most of the petrochemical plant in the U.S. actually is in Baytown. A lot of petrochemical operation in Baytown. It's in the petrochemical industry, energy industry. It's a pretty well-known city called Baytown. The mayor of Baytown, when he started to introduce himself in the meeting, he said, "My name is Brandon. I forgot his last name, but I'm the mayor of Baytown. But that's a part-time job. My day job is a quality manager in Air Liquide." I was sitting next to the mayor of Huizhou from China. He was stunned that a mayor with so much going on in the city can be a part-time job. Of course, the same flip around is the U.S. side of the official have no clue what a mayor in China means and how big that job is. It's because we're at this interface that the misalignment and misunderstanding can occur easily. So how do we play a proactive role in the organization to bridge those differences, trying to bring things together? I think it's a role we all should be playing. That's one. On the other hand, when I use the word cultural agility, is because we are in a unique role. You have the chance to play that role to bridge that difference. Many others may not. I think it's a unique advantage where you could play, especially in this geopolitical environment. Sometimes it can be very challenging. But I think we should be proactively play that role. On the other hand, think about we are who we are. We are not going to be changing who we are. On the other hand, we should be playing a role to trying to bridge that gap as much as we can. So that in that context, I brought the culture agility topic. Let me see what the next slides. I forgot who was asking me the other day about hobbies and stuff. Obviously I already retired. I focus on my hobby, not my work. But I don't know how many of you've heard about this concept called the ikigai. That's a Japanese concept actually. Focus on what you get paid for, what you're good at, what you love, and what the world needs. In the ideal world, is all those things aligned right in the middle. You find a job perfectly aligned. The world needs, you're good at, you get paid, you love. That's the perfect job, but not too many of us can find that perfect spot, to be honest. You just have to figure out, excuse me, where the closest place you can find and what's, among that full circle, what's most important for you. Some people say, hey, what I just solved the world hunger problem is most important for you, then you're going to be focused on that side of the issue. If you see, hey, I'm going to focus on what I love, then you're going to be focused on this. Is again, it's a different way to think about the self-awareness, but that's what I think it's a good framework to think about what's important, the self-awareness. For myself, right now I focus on 3 hobbies: photography, marathon, and reading. To be honest, it's something I've been doing for the last probably 20 years. For example, photography. How did I start doing photography? Because my job requires a lot of travel. I'm thinking, heck, if I have the time to travel and opportunity to travel, I might well do something about it. So I developed a hobby of photography. So go somewhere, trying to take photos, so that not just the tourist, but understand a little bit about the culture, take some photos. So that's integrate that into part of my job. Marathon running. When I travel, always pack a pair of running shoes. It doesn't matter where. I've done running in Moscow, Tokyo, Shanghai. When I go to a new place, usually I just pack up a pair of shoes, go out running. That's how you go to actually get to know a new place. Reading. When you travel on an airplane, have plenty of time. I just end up, I have an iPad, read a lot. But that's, again, whatever hobby you have, if you can integrate that hobby and interest as a part of your job, that's perfect. You know, that's the way the job. When people tend to think about the job and the life and work balance, I'm not sure that's the right way to think about things. That two things are not. The ideal thing is not necessarily balance. I think the ideal thing is if you can integrate those two aspects together. I think that'll probably help on both sides. This is my last slide. In the end of the day, think about career, think about life. It's a journey. That's, by the way, that's a photo I took in the woodland. The journey is the reward. It's in the end of the day, you know, whatever role, whatever you achieve, that's less important than actually the experience of getting there. I'm a marathon runner. You know, to finish a marathon, it's a hard work, but really the enjoyment is actually the training part. How you get there, the training. This morning, it's a perfect weather. I went out and ran a 30K, actually 18 mile this morning. That's what the enjoyment is. It's not the break any record. I will never break any record. I don't know that. It's the journey. On the bottom, it's a quote from Warren Bernie's, become a leader is synonymous with becoming yourself. It's precisely that simple, and it's also that difficult. I think that's a perfect way to describe what leadership is and why the self-awareness in the end is so much an important part of leadership. I'll end there. Lastly, I'll do an advertisement for my book. It's again, it came out on Amazon on January 10th, and it was a bestseller, a new release in several categories. If anybody interested, that's the link, or you can search my name in Amazon. It's going to be there. Anybody, if it's interested in connect with me on LinkedIn, feel free to send me an invitation. I'll be happy to connect. I'll stop there and happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Zhao, for a wonderful talk here. And I believe that we have so many takeaways to learn and to explore. The self-awareness. Actually, this is the second time I'm hearing, and actually from the last time I heard about it, I share with my colleagues. They feel like it's really so true, right? Self-awareness, lead to your self-confidence. You can blindly be confident without knowing yourself well. Yeah, another thing is the influencing circle. And for myself personally, that I was able to practice a little bit at my work. And then I do see that recognition that easily can come up. You don't even need to ask for it. People will come up and saying that, hey, the impact they see. Yeah, I really appreciate your simplicity of the pictures, and give us a very profound meaning. Yeah, I really enjoy seeing those pictures. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that feedback.
Yeah, maybe we can take a few minutes break, and Sandra, if you want to show the QR code for the PCE WeChat group, you can do so. Feel free to do so. Maybe we'll give Dr. Zhao a few minutes. And then we'll get into
I need to get out, right?
You need to get out. Okay. Alrighty.
No, you don't need to get out, right, Dr. Zhao? 赵博士，你不用走，只是说试着下来做 question answer.
Yeah.
No, you don't need to.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
For the sharing, I can do it, right? And also, I put the second poll there, so if people want to answer it.
Yeah, so for the question, let's, if you have a question, please raise your hand, then we'll take turns for you to ask questions. Yeah.
I shared a few links in the chat if anybody's interested.
Thank you. All right, we can proceed to the Q&A session. Anybody have any questions? Thank you, Nancy. We see Mimi Xu. Please go ahead, open your mic and yeah, turn on your video.
Hi, Dr. Zhao. I follow your LinkedIn profile. Just wonder how you become like a practice. I feel like your writing is very provoking. I just wanted to see if you have any advice, like how you become such a proficient writer. I think the writing is very encouraging.
I don't think I'm a proficient writer. To be honest, in the beginning, it was the first post I wrote. I think it was 2017. Took me a month to actually have the courage to post it. I had my son to review it, revise it. But at some point you realize I don't need to be perfect. I'm sure I make plenty of mistakes. If I make mistakes, that's okay. It's not the end of the world. Focus on the message rather than focus on the perfection. So that's my mindset. So I see but plenty of mistakes in my writing, and I don't make a big deal of it. I think in the last 5 years, only 2 people complained that, hey, your grammar or your mistakes, heck, no big deal. So that's with that mindset, I'm sure anybody can write it. The key is be authentic, share something personal, be authentic. By the way, thank you for following my writing.
Yeah, I thought you were so productive. Almost every other day I saw a update over there. I was like, wow, you write so frequently. Well, truly, yeah, very encouraging. Thank you.
Now I retired. I have plenty of time.
Yeah. Maybe I can comment that follow Mimi Shu's question is that I believe Dr. Zhao, he is a really good thinker, and deep thinker. So there, I believe there's so many ideas coming out of his mind every single day that he will really willing to share. Okay, next question from Jihua. Jihua, you can turn on your video.
Yeah, Dr. Zhao, thanks a lot for sharing with us. This is my second time to hear your webinar. Still learn quite a lot. And thanks, Melody. Good to see you again. I'm just curious. I have a teenager boy. He plays video games quite a lot. He will have exam next, the coming October for high school entrance. I do hope he can get a good score. Maybe that's from an Asian parent's perspective. But sometimes he doesn't listen to me. He thinks I'm outdated, saying that's Asian perspective. Sometimes he called me more like Asian 恐龙.
Tiger mom.
Yeah. So to be honest, I'm not that focusing on academia. Relatively give him a lot of freedom, but I do hope he can keep a little bit more focused. I don't want him to play video games all the weekend. I'm curious, how do you motivate your children who was educated here, right? So he doesn't accept our culture or our Asian culture 100%, but still motivate him and doesn't want to, impact parents and kids' relationship. That's my concern. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. I think that's an issue many of us struggle. It's how do you balance the on the one hand give them the freedom, on the other hand make sure they get good education. I'll share two different perspectives. Personally, I think the Chinese education system focuses too much about education of knowledge, not enough education about how to be a people, 怎么样做人. Not enough the education in that aspect. How do you teach your kids about conflict resolution, leadership? Those things you cannot teach. It's very often the kids are pretty smart nowadays. I think they watch you do what you do. They not necessarily listen to what you say, but actually watch very carefully what you do. The best thing, I'm not sure I have any good advice, but I think one is to try to be equal, trying to reason with them rather than trying to dictate what they do. Two is, if you want to they do something less, my advice is rather than tell them doing something less is figure out the working together something else. How do you do something more so that he generates some interest in something else? That's probably an easier way than tell them, hey, stop playing a game. You're not going to stop them. You're not going to be happy, and you're not going to be easily convincing them. So you have to figure out, what's their interest. For example, I'll give an example. My kids actually, both of them give up learning Chinese. I think that's one thing they regretted after studying Chinese for a few years. They just don't want to spend the Sunday afternoon in the Chinese school. So fine, it's in the end, it's life is about making a choice. Is it important? Absolutely, it's important. But a lot of the things are important. We have to make choices. If you don't do this, what are you going to be doing? Now let's agree on what you're going to be doing. So those are some tactic. But I think in the end of the day, try to dictate what they do and how they behave. I think it's less productive rather than working with them. Figure out that, hey, what is your strategy, and help them to make that decision by themselves rather than you make the decision for themselves. I think that's to be honest, both my boy, I guess every kid goes through some of that stage, but even today when they make a decision, I don't tell them what they do, but the less I tell them, the more likely they actually ask my advice when they make big decisions.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, the next question is from Sarah. Go ahead.
Hey, 你好, hi, Xinjin 是吧? It's my pleasure and it's my honor to be here and listen to your presentation, and I love it. And especially when you said when you drop your self-criticize on perfection of writing the book, and it doesn't have to be perfect. And that's one of my self-awareness that was discovered recently. Like I was always looking for to be perfect. And I guess that same awareness is actually, I moved from how I discover myself and discover how I parenting my kids, that they has to be perfect. And so, and I just have another question about, because today's topic is about how parents' career development influence kids' leadership. And what I got from you is that parents to be the demonstrate for our kids in our career life rather than to tell them what to do, and also be a coach for them, saying, okay, what is your goal and how am I going to help you to achieving your goal? And so that's the 2 points I hear, and correct me or just remind me if I'm missing something.
No, I think you said very well. It's in the end of the day, the best way to teach the kids is we play our role, and it's we as a role model rather than force them to be something. That's in the end it's their life, it's their decision. I think that they'll make those calls, they'll make those decisions. But the more we behave in a certain way, I think the more we're going to influence their decision. That's why I see, the more I reflect, the more, although I've grown up in China, in rural, but I think a lot of the thing I reflect what happened when I was 5-year-old, 10 years old, those things really influence how we are, how we behave. I think the same thing will happen for our kids, the next generation. That's why I think that's my mindset.
Yeah, got it. So you, it seems like you find out, you discover your context of growing, your background of who you are, and when you are 5 and 10, and discover that in your journey of growth and which helped you grow. And I'm just curious to know that how did you get on the journey of bring self-awareness to your life? And one of the things I'm hearing is making mistake. I made a lot of mistake, and I start to bring awareness to myself, to my daily life from 2 years ago when I realized my parenting doesn't work and it just causes tons of conflicts. And that was my motivation. And when did you start to get on the journey and say, okay, I need to bring some self-awareness to my daily life?
There are two aspects of that question. In terms of my own career, I think that's a lifelong journey. I think writing this book last year actually helped me reflect a lot of things, got more clarity as I was writing the book. So that never stopped. That's a lifelong journey. In terms of the parenting, I think, the first kids, it's start from fresh. You learn, you make a lot of mistakes. So we have second child is 6 years younger. So the second one, you reflect what happened and so what worked, what not. At the work, in the context of working, I had a habit of every Friday I block maybe an hour or two on my calendar. Friday morning, I don't let people schedule meeting in that Friday morning on my calendar. I spend 1 or 2 hours to reflect, hey, what worked in this week, what didn't work. That's one way of intentionally to do some self-reflection. Hey, did I miss something big this week? Just so that you have a quiet time to reflect. I think that's have a habit like that to become a disciplined part of your journey. I think the parenting you could apply it the same way. Hey, have a conversation. Not that I did that, but think about, is there some way to have a regular conversation every week, every month? Hey, what worked, what didn't work? Is there a different way? Something to think about it. My kids are all out, so.
Got it. Yeah, that's a good suggestion. And I will take the mission of writing my journey of what works and what doesn't, and set up a time and just for my self-reflection. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah, for a great question. Any other questions?
Yeah, thank you for this wonderful talk. Can I ask a question? Like if you can comment on leadership and gender roles, maybe, because what we see is in our generation, I think, especially in lots of the Chinese community groups, you see, I think usually men are actually leaders of the organizations with a lot of like female volunteers. But in the younger generation, we see, especially in like high school, college age, we see girls take up a lot of leadership roles. They seem, very confident and mature, while the young men, like Asian American young men, usually people feel like they are less confident, right? I mean, that's what we see. So if you can comment on that, that would be great.
that has a lot of different aspects of that question, but in terms of the gender balance today, I think I included one set of a statistic in the book. Back in year 2000 or 2001, there were like 2 or 3 CEO of the Fortune 500 were female. And right now has, I think, about 30 some female. So that was a pretty big progress from a couple of to about 3 dozen or so. That's a big progress. But obviously, it's still the society as a whole. It's still not quite balanced in terms of the gender in the leadership role. Specifically, in terms of the next younger generation, I see. I guess maybe I'm not sure I answer your question, but I ask it this way. I lived in China for 3 years. I see the younger generation, the 20s, 30s, that generation. A lot of, doesn't matter if male or female, I see a lot of very talented, very capable people become leaders in many organizations. So that's a very promising. In the U.S., I think your observation is probably correct. I see a lot of Asian male has not quite. If you look at our colleagues, India colleagues, has a lot more success in the corporate world than the Asian Chinese in the organization in general. Come back to one thing. I think one of the biggest mistake we as a group make is we don't take enough risk both in terms of life and career. Anytime if you want to do something, you have to be willing to take risk. There is no guarantee to success, but if you don't take risk, you lose a lot of opportunities to do things. I reflect in my career, every time I take some very oddball assignment, very out of the kind of the mainstream business assignment, end up you always learn a lot of things that you get a very different perspectives. Many of us hesitant to take those roles because it's outside of our comfort role or their comfort zone. Reality is, if you're not comfortable, a lot of people are not comfortable. So it is. I think about taking career risk, encouraging the child taking something outside of the mainstream activity. That's the advice I can give. I'm not sure that answers your question, but that's several different ways to think about that question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Laura. Any other questions? If not, then maybe I can ask Dr. Zhao a question. I wanted to turn the question around that. What motivated you to be a leader?
What motivated me to be a leader? Oh, good question. I think that's when I was writing the book, I interviewed a lot of people. It's interesting. Some people, before I answer my own, it's some people know what they want in life very early on. Other people, it's a lifelong struggle. It's a lifelong journey. I see myself, what motivated me to be a leader probably changed throughout my life. In the early stage, I think we all trying to make it in this society, wants to be successful. Now you realize, I think more and more you feel it's not, success is not the right way to think about it. It's the impact, what impact you're making. That's what matters. It's not, hey, do I get this job or do I get that job? It's hey, do I have an opportunity to impact a business decision? Do I have the impact to influence other people's how people make decisions? For example, the last before I retired, the last 2-3 years, I spent a lot of time mentoring people. Heck, if I can. Because my help, some people made some right career decision and did better. I think that's wonderful. I think that's a personal satisfaction. So it depends on how you define success, and depends on how you define a leader. As time you go on, you'll think about the lead. In the latter part of my career, I think more and more leader is more about influence of making impact and influence decision making rather than leader as in certain role. So that's I don't know if that answer your question, but
Thank you, Dr. Zhao. Yeah, I'm asking the question for the audience. Another question is that when you reflect back, right now you have your book out, and you've done your self-discovery, pretty successfully. When you look back, which are the steps that you feel like, hey, those are the key steps that you feel like, hey, those are the aha moment that, oh yeah, this is what I really want to do. Do you have? I believe you have many of those moments, right? Yeah, can you share with us?
I think what will naturally prompt you to make those reflection is when you actually have bumps on the road, or make so things that didn't work out the way it is, or the way you want it to be. You have to reflect. It's rather than get frustrated, it's hey, you reflect why things didn't work out that way. Is that how important that is? Is there a different way to achieve the objective? So that's I would say let me see specifically. Maybe I'll make one specific comment in terms of my own career. When I was in China trying to develop this investment decision in 2017 and 2020, on the one hand, it was a big success. It was the largest investment for the company, and it moved forward, and now it's being constructed. So I feel very good about it. On the other hand, I had a lot of difficulty to influence decision making between sitting in China versus what you see on the ground versus the headquarters in Houston, and trying to connect and influence the decision making. That's part of the process that I learned. Sometimes folks are right. You might be 100% right, but if you don't think about how do you influence the organization, you're not going to be successful. No, those are again, I think it's a every time you meet certain big challenges or bumps on the road, I think you should step back and reflect. That's you're going to slowly have more clarity in your mind. Hey, what's important for me, and what should I be doing next?
Thank you. Next question, Peggy. Turn on your camera, please.
Okay, I keep my camera shut, because it's not convenient. But anyways,
no worries. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the presentation, which is very inspiring. So I do have a question, because we know most of us work very hard, but it's not limited to Chinese immigrants. Also, the other ethnic groups who are immigrants to the new land, they all work so hard. And I'm pretty sure most of us wouldn't meet the expectation of our job descriptions. But in terms of expand our circle and explore the possibilities of leadership skills or the gray area as you described, can you elaborate a little bit more on what are the areas that we can explore outside of our inner circle of our role? Thank you.
Okay, good question. It's the best place to think about those things is start with something related with your job, related to your work. It means, hey, if I'll pick an example I discussed earlier. If you're doing a technical project, if you spend a little bit of time to figure out working with the business team or marketing team or whatever, to proactively figure out, hey, if this is successful, what does that mean? Once you understand that, see, hey, if that's the case, maybe we should do something else, do something different. Does that make sense? By proactively engaging those conversations, I think it will expand your horizon. Rather than folks just doing your technical work, you're going to have a much broader perspective of what you should be doing. I think this is a kind of a phrase people use a lot, but rather than just to focus on doing things right, you more likely to focus on do the right thing. Because if you can understand the context of work, that's one dimension to think about it. The other dimension, some people tend to use is volunteer in other things, the United Way, whatever, the other community activity. The advantage of those kind of activity like PCE is you can practice your leadership skill in a very low risk environment. Heck, if you make a mistake here, it's not the end of the world. It's not going to impact your career, but you have the chance to practice your leadership. You have the chance to practice your communication skill or interpersonal skill. So that's another dimension to think about if the company has other activity to kind of doing some practice work for leadership. Without taking a whole lot of risk, that's a different dimension to think about it.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it really just gives me the reassurance that I'm doing the right thing, because I've been a member of the volunteer for PCE club, well, more than a year. But anyway, I've learned so much so far. Obviously still looking for the opportunity for gaining more skill set on the leadership, but as you mentioned, it's not just the skill set, right? It's also the passion and what's the other one? I just forgot. Sorry about that. But obviously, what you mentioned is like if you do anything outside of your job, you can still have a lot of opportunities to practice those skills, to explore those areas at a lower risk.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. That's my takeaway message.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you.
Peggy, thank you very much for the question. And, we'll welcome more people to join our PC club. And here is a great platform for you to practice leadership, like all we did. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, Dr. Zhao, I want to mention that the beautiful flyer you see that actually was made by Peggy. So
thank you,
great
Peggy.
appreciation to Peggy's talent. Yeah.
Right. Yes, I'm an artist. Yeah.
Thank you.
赵博士，我是 Sandra 我就把刚才的 survey 呢，就把它打在这里哈。那么刚才我们的 survey 是第一个 question， 就是说你有没有问过自己为什么想成为一个 leader？第二个就是说你单位有没有人问过你为什么想成为一个 leader 哈？那第一个呢就是比较多蓝色，就是有问过自己的比较多。我们一共有34个人回答问题哈。第一个的话有看一下哈，第一个就是2次都是34个人回答问题，但是呢第一次的话呢是有25个说 yes， 9个说 no， 就是这个那第二个呢，对，第二个是有也是34个人回答，有14个人说 yes， 有20个人说 no， 就是说今天在座的都是华人对，这两个都是这两个百分比就可以看出来我没有打出那个具体的百分比，急急忙忙画的。
Actually, the gap is smaller. So 我看到Sandra 一个是70%多，一个大概是40%多，就是说Dr. Zhao，我们这个 group 更倾向于 leadership. Anyhow, just the gap is smaller. I'm advertising for
还有呢，我看了一下哈，就是因为我们这个 session 上来下去有人哈，所以2次的虽然都是34人，但不是 exactly the same 34人那么但是第2次回答 yes 里面哈，我好像看到就是我还没有统计完哈，我觉得很少第一次就是一般这个蓝色和这个蓝色，除非是他这时候还没有上来或怎么样哈。就是大部分是这里说 yes 的人，这里才说 yes。那我也有看到这里没有说 yes， 本来没有问过自己，但他 organization 就找他了，可能太 outstanding 了但是大部分都是这里说 yes 这蛮有趣的，我会把这个统计下来寄给你
这个你反过来这么想这个问题吧，就是这个 second poll 这个 answer yes 的是 41， 这个和我那个 poll 的结果122的 41%， 就是
这个是社会对我们的看法
Yeah， 然后就是说 ，Have you ever asked yourself， 我们这个里边的百分比稍微低一些，我那个里边是82，你这个好像大概有70%多一点，就是说明我们自己就是我们这个 group 里边更多的人就是说自己也没有问自己 Why do you want to be a leader？
哦，是这样哈，其实蛮有趣的哈。我自己呢，就是我自己在很多地方做 leader，所以我这个问题是早就问过了。但是呢，我自己在工作中呢，从来也没有自问过我要不要在我的工作上做 leader，因为我很愿意做一个 individual contributor。For some reason 哈，有一些个人的 reason， 一直到后来很偶然的，就是老板来问我说你要不要做 manager， 我才做了1年哈。我就在想哈，就是那我就回想我自己的个性和能力哈，我在外面也做蛮多的 leadership 的工作，我就在想为什么我没有在这个就像你说，在这个 work context 下面对自己提这个问题呢，也是一个很有趣的问题。我为什么没有去找我的 leadership 去申诉说我其实做 management 可能更合适，为什么我没有去想这个问题呢？哈，也蛮有趣的。
其实这个东西问不问是另一个 step 啊，但自己要想，就是说自己要有这个 clarity。Why do I want to be a leader？ 你自己心里边就是说越有这个 clarity， 就是你 make a decision 啊，你问问题时就更有一些guiding principle， 就是说help you to have those conversation。
我就是你刚才讲到说这个 self awareness 的话有4个方面哈，其中有一个就是说你自己是被人家怎么看啊？一个是你自己的 principle， 一个是你的长处和短处哈，该怎么用你。3个是说别人怎么看你，你也要了解哈。第4个就是说在你的工作的 context 里你怎么看自己哈。我就看到这一些哈，其实我就在想说，实际上我们自己看自己和别人看我们呢是有一个蛮大的差距。这个差距的一个幼稚哈，但是这个差距的一个很大的其实我们是可以把这个 gap 减小的，就是当我们不光自己看见自己，而且我们要自己学会表达自己的时候，我们其实这个差距是可以急剧减小的。但还是要从你的第一个问题开始问如果第一个问题问了以后，才有第2个问题。
对，你讲得很好，就是这个问题啊，对我们这个群体对 immigrants 更重要。为什么呢？就是说我们这个就是说你要是在这儿找到的你自己一些 value， 自己一些什么可能跟这个 society 比较吻合的话，那个 gap 可能会小一些。我们因为这 grown up in a different culture has a different background， 所以我们怎么去认识我们自己和别人怎么看 perceive 我们，这个 gap 会很大的经常，所以我们必须自己去 develop 这个 self awareness， 就是自己想办法去 close 那个 gap， 否则那个 gap 会有就是说 very big impact。
那个赵博士，我想就是接着那个这个叫 influence circle right like inner circle is more about yourself like performance and then 还有个 outer， 然后在 in between 的话那就是你还可以操作的空间，然后你的 potential。 那so 而且我听你说到就是说的位置越高，然后那一个空间可能会越大，然后实际上就是说你的 uncertainty 可能会更，或者说 potentially you can explore 更大。那does that mean that 那样的 position 那个 complexity 就是会更复杂是吧？那种情形会更复杂 situation。
Yeah. Naturally it's the bigger the responsibility, the more likely you have to figure out what's your job, you have to figure out what needs to be done. Nobody's going to tell you what your job is.
Yeah, you probably don't even have a clear job description. You have to define your role.
At a certain point, part of your job is to figure out what's important, and you figure out that. So, the later your career stage, that gap, or the higher level you go, the bigger that gap is.
Yeah. Thank you.
还想接着问一下哈，就是赵博士，你看我们实际上都是做父母的，还有一个很重要的就是说，在孩子的生活中，我们怎么跟他们交谈 leadership 的事情。其实不光是说其实我们的孩子在很大程度上也有可能蛮受我们的影响的哈。我就在想说，这几个问题也可以在饭桌上跟他们聊。
对，这些事情呀，我写完这个书了， my first two beta readers 就是 my two boys 两个儿子一个每个 chapter 都从头到尾给我提了好多 feedback。其实说实话了，写这个书本身也就是个 opportunity 跟他们交流让他们大约就是他们中间也能学到一些东西，因为这些东西啊必须有个 context 你才能跟他去交流去，你就广泛的给他讲一些 concept 不一定很深，但就是有一些具体的事情，比如说我这上个礼拜吧，我儿子他在给他就是manager 这些做 performance review 了，然后我们就一起在谈这些就是这些就关于怎么样think about what's your role, think about the circles 因为就是有一个具体的事情了，你就可以，然后这些是context 就容易去 discuss 这些事情。你要是光去泛的去讲这些东西，我想很难去让他们真的 internalize 这些 concept。
好，那我们还有剩下10分钟哈，我们是计划要准时的那个结束今天的会议那么还有10分钟还有朋友有问题要问吗？RS go ahead。
Hello， 赵博士你好，今天我从你的这个talk 学到了很多，我特别喜欢你说的这个，我们就是一切都是从 self awareness 开始，那么我想问一下，就是你的这个 self awareness。Does it come from someone else, or because it's called self-awareness, right? So is it come out of you completely, or is someone else inspired you to do this?
I think a lot of the self-awareness is from I would see probably two things. One is when you I'm not sure mistake is the right word, but when you have a bump on the road. I think you need to make sure rather than become bitter, it's a reflection, right? What did I learn? If failure is absolutely part of your life, but if you don't learn, it's a failure. If you learn something out of it, that's an experience. So part of that is through all the bumps on the road, I reflect that's a part of growing up, a part of learning. The other thing I would say is at a certain point of my career, I had a couple of mentors, talking with the mentor who are willing to have a very open, very honest way to think about where you are, what you're doing versus what the company. I think it help you get a different perspective versus your own perspective. Those are probably two aspects was most helpful for me.
Okay, thank you so much. And as a parent, if we want to help our kids to grow this self-awareness, what can we do, to help them?
I don't know how to answer that question, to be honest. I think it's similar to what we are. I think if we're trying to help them, trying to have a conversation to on the specific rather than to give for example, if I have a conversation, I would focus on the you're different. Here is why you're different. You have a different culture background. And all that. But if you focus on you are what you're good at it. Those are something pretty factual. In terms of the other aspect, the full thing, right? The value, I think that's something hard to. I think that's more from kids will see what you do and watch how you behave. That's how they are going to develop their value. in terms of the perception part, I think that's something you could have pick, for example, the last couple of years with all the Asian hate crime and all that. If you depends on how close you have with your child in terms of those conversations. Pick if something happens, use those moments to have some conversation. Hey, does that impact you or your interaction with your friends in school? Do you talk about those things in school? Ask them to get a sense of what's in their mind. I think will help you better understand. I'm guessing most kids are very sensitive to those issues, but not too many kids talk to parents about those issues. So you have to be very gently to figure out a way to actually open those conversations.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So yeah, so I guess we cannot push them to self-awareness, but we can probably influence them from small talks daily.
Yeah. I think that it's the key to me. One of the key focus is to figure out the develop a dynamic so they are very open to you. When they have issues, they are willing to come to you for advice, have that conversation. That's probably the most important part.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, so that actually goes back to Dr. Zhao mentioned the inferencing part is actually building the trust, right? So if you have the trust there, they can come to you. They feel it's safe to talk about it. Yeah. Relationship building.
That's a good apply of that principle. Yeah.
Any other questions? Yeah, maybe I'll help out here. So Dr. Zhao, you mentioned that recent times that you spend quite a bit of effort to mentor your more junior people to you, and what would you be feeling that the common thing that you see among those your mentees, and what would you like to advise to this group of people?
I think all the stuff I talk about, for example, that two-circle theory I shared, that's actually something why I was mentoring the people. I think about how to explain it to them. Hey, what's your job? But that's how I came up that idea. I think the thing about mentoring is the key about mentoring. I don't know how many of you have mentor or mentee relationship. It's the mentee own that relationship, but the mentor doesn't own that relationship. The mentee has to be proactive and figure out that, hey, what do you want to get out of that relationship? But be proactive and figure out because the mentor it cannot own that relationship. It's the other way around.
So true. Sandra, did you have a question?
All right. No, I don't. No.
All right. Yeah. So thank you again, Dr. Zhao, for a wonderful talk. And we really appreciate that sharing your wisdoms of your self-discovery journey with us. And maybe I can, help out here for Dr. Zhao that if you do read Dr. Zhao's book, and please, provide your review on Amazon and give us thumbs up. Thank you.
If anybody interested in reading the book, share a review on Amazon so that the message can spread to more people. Feel free to share the book with your community or whatever community you have.
Yeah. Once again,
if I could add one more comment is. I guess in 2 days, May 1st is going to be the Asian Heritage Month, the May. A lot of company actually take advantage of that month to celebrate the Asian heritage. And if your organization interested in have a conversation about leadership, I would be happy to share my with your organization if there is any interest.
All right. Once again, that if you want to learn parenting or learn leadership, please join us at PCE. Thank you again, Dr. Zhao. And we'll we'll welcome you back for the next talk. Okay. Enjoy the rest of the night. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Melody.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night. Thank you.
Bye-bye, Sandra.